Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio have met in Saudi Arabia on resetting fractured bilateral relations and ending the Ukraine conflict. French President Emmanuel Macron has hosted an emergency security meeting with European leaders in Paris as concerns grow over Washington's policy shift on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And Israel marks 500th day of captivity for the remaining hostages, while expecting to receive more captives in the coming week. We begin with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio have met in the Saudi capital Riyadh. The meeting focused on resetting fractured bilateral relations and ending the Ukraine conflict. Despite both sides playing down the chances of any breakthrough, the talks have nevertheless triggered concern from Europe and Ukraine, who were not invited to the discussions. Moscow says President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump want to move on from abnormal relations between their countries, and that it sees no place for Europe to be at any negotiating table. Lavrov has also refused settlement negotiations.
The European philosophy has not gone anywhere, so I don't know what they can do at the negotiating table. If they continue scheming with some tricky ideas on freezing the conflict, while they, as they usually do, just mean to continue the war, why invite them there? There cannot even be a thought in the settlement negotiations that some territories should be ceded to Ukraine. Do we have to cede with people there, with the Russian people or with no people at all in the territories?
In the meantime, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Turkey to meet President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Zelensky said since his country has not been invited to the US-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia, he will not accept any outcome from the meeting. Ahead of the peace talks, Russia reiterated its demand for Ukraine to give up its NATO ambitions. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has also dismissed the idea that his country will return any territory it has already taken. Nadia Swan has more.
Very, very clearly, in fact, he has said absolutely that there is no question of Russia giving up any territory that it's taken from Ukraine over the last several years, and that's actually 20% of Ukraine's territory. So, quite a strong opening to those negotiations. He's also, another key demand that Lavrov has laid down is that Ukraine give up any ambitions to join NATO, and of course that was something that President Zelensky has wanted to ensure Ukraine's security for the future as well. Now, Lavrov has also dismissed any idea about basically the Europeans having a seat at the negotiating table, which has left European leaders somewhat on the back foot and scrambling for some sort of response to that, and they are meeting to consider how they're going to deal with this Russia and US meeting that's taking place in Saudi Arabia at the moment.
That was Nadia Swan reporting. In Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron has hosted an emergency security meeting with European leaders in Paris as concerns grow over Washington's policy shift on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Hours before the Paris meeting, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was prepared to deploy troops to Ukraine if needed.
At stake is not just the future of Ukraine, it is an existential question for Europe as a whole, and therefore vital for Britain's national interest. Europe must play its role, and I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground alongside others if there is a lasting peace agreement.
Macron said he spoke with US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky said they discussed security guarantees and achieving a lasting peace in Ukraine. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said his country would consider sending peacekeeping forces to Ukraine. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called for European unity to support Ukraine, but said it was premature to discuss sending troops. Scholz also called for Kyiv's involvement in the peace talks. The European leaders' emergency summit on Ukraine follows Washington's announcement that Ukrainian and European leaders could be frozen out of peace negotiations. Leaders of Germany, NATO and the European Union were among those who joined the talks. Ross Cullen has more from Paris.
At the forefront of European leaders' minds, really focusing those leaders that there could be European troops patrolling a potential demilitarized zone if one were to be set up in the aftermath of any possible agreement between Kiev and Moscow, and really the seriousness of having Western boots on the ground inside Ukraine, even for peacekeeping purposes. Last year, President Macron said that having Western boots on the ground was not being ruled out. That idea of maintaining strategic ambiguity, leaving everything on the table to leave yourself as many possible options as you might have available to you to continue to support your ally, as Europe has been doing for Ukraine. So the idea that having Western boots on the ground, suggested by Emmanuel Macron in 2024, but there was immediate criticism and pushback, notably from Germany, that said that that was not an idea that was going to go anywhere. Well, 1 year later, we're speaking about it very seriously. Sweden said that they are not ruling out sending Swedish troops into Ukraine to support any broader peacekeeping mission. However, the Spanish representatives here did say that we can't speak about deploying troops just yet because they could only be deployed once there has been a peace agreement signed, and we are still so far away from seeing any such peace settlement.
That was Ross Cullen in Paris. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has concluded his European tour in Ireland, where he met with the country's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. Wang said China and Ireland have made remarkable achievements in cooperation across various fields, demonstrating huge potential and broad prospects for further collaboration. Li Jianhua reports from Dublin.
China-Ireland relations were at the forefront of Foreign Minister Wang Yi's meetings with top leaders here in Dublin. Wang highlighted ties dating back to 1979 when China launched its reform and opening up policy, and noted that relations between the two countries have evolved alongside China's economic transformation. Wang also praised the Shannan experience, referring to the Shannan Free Zone here in Ireland, established in 1959 to attract foreign investment through streamlined regulations and tax incentives. He called it an inspiration for China's special economic zones. The Irish Prime Minister affirmed that Ireland values China as an important partner. China is Ireland's largest trading partner in Asia, and Ireland is one of the few European countries that maintains a trade surplus with China. Key Irish exports include pharmaceuticals, medical devices and agri-food products. For China, Ireland serves as a gateway to Europe due to its EU membership. However, some trade tensions do exist. Ireland was one of the 10 EU countries that voted in favour of additional tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles last autumn, and China launched an anti-dumping investigation into EU dairy imports last August. Ahead of Monday's meeting in Dublin, the Irish Prime Minister said Ireland wants to grow ties with China sustainably based on fair competition across a wide range of sectors, including in the agri-food industry. Wang Yi in the meeting said China would like to work with Ireland and the EU in the spirit of equality to resolve differences. For Ireland, this is a delicate balancing act as it seeks to maintain strong economic ties with China while also aligning with EU policies.
That was Li Jianhua reporting in Dublin. Turning to the Middle East, Israel will receive the bodies of 4 hostages from Gaza on Thursday and 4 more bodies next week. Officials say they're also working on bringing back 6 living captives on Saturday. Meanwhile, the Jewish state decided to continue stationing its troops in southern Lebanon at 5 locations, despite previously agreeing to fully withdraw its forces by Tuesday. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
It was a rather somber occasion in Israel as the country marks 500 days to the beginning of the war, 500 days in which 73 hostages are still there, still held in Gaza. And in this sense, there are news. Israel is preparing to receive 4 bodies which are held in Gaza, probably as early as Thursday. This is as opposed to what was initially reported. This has nothing to do with the work of the mediators. This is some secret clause that was signed between the two sides when this agreement was reached just about a month ago. It was decided that on day 33 of the agreement, 4 to 5 bodies will be handed over from Hamas to Israel. As far as we're hearing, it will be 4 bodies this coming Thursday and 4 bodies next Thursday. And as this is happening, an Israeli delegation is in Cairo for the moment, still dealing only with the implementation of the first phase of the ceasefire. When will negotiations on the second phase begin? It is not really clear. And as this is happening in Gaza, there's another front that is Lebanon. On Tuesday, the ceasefire will basically end. And according to the original plan, Israeli forces should have withdrawn from Lebanon completely. We can already report that this is not the case. Israeli forces will remain in 5 strategic points in Lebanese territory. As always, it seems that it is up for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to decide where things are heading, at least on the Israeli perspective.
That was Jonathan Regev reporting. Finally, in China, Chinese President Xi Jinping has called on the country's private sector to seize opportunities in a new era to advance Chinese modernization. He also shared his hopes and expectations for private entrepreneurs.
Private enterprises and entrepreneurs should embrace entrepreneurship and patriotism, focus on strengthening, optimising and expanding their businesses while abiding by the law, promote common prosperity and be firm contributors to building socialism with Chinese characteristics and advancing Chinese modernisation.
The Chinese president was speaking as he met representatives from privately owned companies on Monday. President Xi urged more support for the healthy and high-quality development of the private economy. He also pledged that the party and the country will ensure equality for economic entities under all forms of ownership. Senior executives from companies including Huawei, BYD, Xiaomi and Unitree Robotics presented their advice on the development of the economy. Yu Yan has the details.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has attended a symposium on the development of private enterprises on Monday in Beijing, and he delivered a keynote speech after listening to a number of representatives of the private entrepreneurs. Well, for example, these include representatives from the Chinese tech giant Huawei and also the country's leading electric vehicle maker BYD, as well as one of the largest agricultural and husbandry enterprises in China, which is called New Hope Group, and of course more. And she said the private companies have flourished along with the reform and the opening up, and adding that for decades, the CPC theory and practice have been consistent and also developed with the times in terms of the recognition of private economy in socialist modernization. He said the party and the country will always ensure all types of economies would use protection factors equally in accordance with the law and also participating in market competition fairly while being equally protected by law, of course. And she also points out the country's private economy has formed a considerable scale, noting that the huge market potential provided by more than 1.4 billion Chinese people will bring many new opportunities for the development of private economy. On the other hand, the Chinese leader also notes that there are some difficulties and challenges laying in front of the development of the private sectors. But he believes those actually challenges and difficulties appeared in the process of industrial transformation and upgrading. So he believes those challenges are temporary rather than long-term, and also they can be overcome rather than unsolvable. The Chinese leader also added that the implementation of policies to promote the development of the private sector is the current work focus. And he said China is a socialist country ruled by law, calling on relevant parties to make sure fair participation and protect the legitimate rights and the interests of private enterprises and also private entrepreneurs in accordance with the law. Well, in his speech, the Chinese leader also stressed that the enterprises are the main business entities in China and the dynamics of the private enterprises is the first priority. He's calling on the entrepreneurs to fulfill their social responsibilities in building harmonious labor relations, paying attention to environmental protections, while of course contributing more goodwill to the society.
That was Yu Yang reporting. Now, recapping the headlines before we go, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio have met in Saudi Arabia on resetting fractured bilateral relations and ending the Ukraine conflict. French President Emmanuel Macron has hosted an emergency security meeting with European leaders in Paris as concerns grow over Washington's policy shift on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And Israel has marked the 500th day of captivity for the remaining hostages, while expecting to receive more captives in the coming week. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a one-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thanks for listening.